Chapter 12, Formation of Contract. We will now look at the first element of the contract, the formation of the agreement. Recall there are 6 elements of a contract. The agreement, it must be between competent parties who express genuine assent, who then exchange consideration. Their contract is for a lawful purpose, and it's in the form required by law. How do we form the first element of the contract, the agreement? In order to create an agreement, we have to have an offeror, the person making the offer, set terms and express them to the person that they would like to accept the terms, the offeree. For example, someone who took legal environment last semester might offer to you to sell you their business law textbook for $50. You hear those terms and think, okay, that's a great deal. So you accept them. The person making you the offer, I will sell you my textbook for $50, is the offeror. The person who has received the offer is the offeree. And in order to validly accept that offer, you must unconditionally accept the terms that are presented to you. They offer you the textbook for $50, you say you'll buy the textbook for $50. As soon as that occurs, you have an agreement. An offer plus an acceptance equals an agreement. The offer must contain 3 elements. There must be contractual intention, the offer must be communicated to the offeree, and the offer must be definite. Contractual intention refers to the fact that the offeror, the person making the offer, must actually intend to enter into a binding agreement. In other words, they're not joking around. They're not just throwing out numbers and offering you things just to make conversation. They actually intend to be bound by the terms that they offer you. Now, how does someone know that? How do you know whether or not the offeror is actually serious? Well, in the law, we use an objective standard by looking at their conduct, by looking at the actual terms of the offer. Did they say when they would deliver the book? Did they say how much the book would be? Did they tell us how we had to pay for the book? The more information and details we have surrounding the offer when the student offers you their textbook for $50, the more information we have surrounding that, the more likely it is that it's a valid offer. If someone offers to sell you their business law textbook and they say, I'll sell you the business law textbook for $5, and they don't say when you have to pay, they don't mention when they might meet with you for the book, they don't say anything else, they just kind of say it flippantly as they're walking through the hall, you might think, that was a joke. Second, the offer had to be communicated to the offeree. So in contract law, the offeror is considered to be the master of the offer. What does that mean? That means they're in control. The offeror sets the terms of the offer, and they can change the terms of the offer, which we'll talk about in a second. And they make the offer to whomever they choose. And only the offerees that they designate may accept their offer. For example, let's assume I teach 2 classes of legal environment. Let's say class A, I give them an extra credit opportunity. If they go online and read a recent court decision and write up a summary, they can receive 10 points of extra credit. And I only make that offer to the students in class A. But my students in class B hear about the offer because they hear their classmates talking about reading the case. If students in class B decide, you know what, I'd like extra credit too, and they also read the case and submit the assignment, they might think that they would be able to accept my offer. But under the law, you would not be. Why? Because my offer had not been communicated to the students in Class B. They were not my offerees. You may not accept an offer that has not been extended to you. The third element is that the offer must be definite. The law doesn't define what must the offer contain, but it says whatever we choose to put in our offer, it must be clear what the offeree has available to accept. In other words, our textbook. If someone says, I'll offer to sell you my old textbook for $5, well, you don't know what textbook they're referring to, what class it was for, and what condition it's in, and whether or not it's a textbook you need. There are not a lot of terms for that offer. If someone says, I'll sell you my business law textbook that I used in spring of 2020 for $50, that gives you more elements to be able to determine what it is you're being offered. Another example. If a student says, I've got some textbooks I'll sell you for $100, you don't know which textbooks they are. You don't know how many. When they say, I've got some, well, is some 2? Is it 5? Is it 10 textbooks? One person's sum could be only 2 books, where someone else might think some for $100 sounds like you're going to sell me 5 or 6 books. In those examples, we don't have enough information to know what we're actually being offered. So under the law, if we have a situation where an offeror makes you an offer, I'm putting that in quotes, and it's not definite, and then the offeree claims they didn't receive what the offeror offered, the offeror could use their lack of definiteness as a way to get out of the contract and say, yeah, I offered to sell you some books for $100, but that wasn't definite. You didn't know what you were getting, so you can't sue me when you don't get some books for $100. I'm going to talk about this concept more as we go on. The offeror has made a valid offer. They intend to enter into an agreement. They've communicated their offer to an offeree, and their offer has terms that are definite enough that the offeree knows what they are being offered. The offeree then has the decision to make whether or not to accept the terms of the offer. Once the offeree accepts the offer, there is a binding agreement. Before the offeree accepts the offer, the offeror has the ability, as the master of the offer, to terminate, i.e. cancel, the offer that they have made. The offeror can revoke or cancel an offer anytime before the offeree accepts. The offeror has a lot of control. It's their offer, and if they change their minds before the offeree accepts, they can do so. One of the main ways an offeror might terminate an offer is to just revoke it. When an offeror revokes an offer, they're essentially just canceling it, changing their mind, taking it back, and they can do that at any time before the offeree accepts. They don't have to say any particular words. You don't have to contact them and say, I hereby revoke my offer. The revocation, i.e. the taking back of the offer, is effective once the offeree knows about it. So until the offeree knows that you have revoked the offer, they still have a valid offer pending them that they could accept. So the offeror who wants to terminate an offer has to communicate that to the offeree so that they know that there's no longer an offer pending. So the revocation of the offer is not valid until the offeree knows about it. So why would you do this? Like, why would you revoke the offer? Well, let's go back to our example. Let's say the classmate who offered you the business law textbook for $50, they emailed you and said, hey, I heard you were in this class. You can save some money by buying my book. And they're waiting to hear from you. But you wanted to do research. You didn't know how much the textbook cost, so you said, I'll get back to you. I want to find out. In the interim, the classmate who has the textbook runs into somebody who's got money on them right then and offers to buy their textbook for cash on the spot, right? So in that case, your classmate, the offeror, has a situation where, this person doesn't need to research and take their time. They've got $50 right here, and I can be done with this. So they decide to sell the textbook to the person that they run into. As long as that offeror lets the original offeree know that the offer has been canceled before that first offeree accepts, they can do so. So they can run into somebody else and sell the book all day long as they let you know before you, if you were the first offeree, before you unconditionally accept the original offer. That's called a revocation. To revoke an offer is to take it back. And an offeror, as the master of their offer, may do that at any time up until the offeree accepts the offer. You could also have, and I'm going to skip and look at these out of order, you could have a lapse of time. What if the offeror says, as long as you let me know if you want this textbook by 5 o'clock today, you can have it for $50. All right. So in that case, the offeror said, I'll sell you this textbook for $50, but you have to let me know by 5 o'clock. And you're busy, you're working, you're doing other things, and you realize, oh shucks, it's 6:50 and I haven't gotten back to them. By the terms of the offer, it's over. That offer has been terminated by a lapse of time. The time period in which you, the offeree, had to accept the offer has expired. Under the law, that offer has been terminated by the lapse of time. Now, in real life, if the offeror hears from you at 6:50 and they haven't already sold the textbook, they could go ahead and accept your money, and you could have a binding agreement. So the offeror, as the master of the offer, can always agree to do something that they're not legally obligated to do. What this lapse of time is telling you, this law, is that if at 6:50 you communicated to the offeror, I'll take it, I'll buy the book for $50, and they refuse to sell it to you, you as offeree would have no recourse. You couldn't take them to court. You couldn't go to court and say, hey, they made me an offer to sell me this textbook for $50 and they reneged. You would be out of luck. You'd have no cause of action. It would not be actionable. Why? Because under the terms of the offer, there was a time frame and you went past it. So it's not enforceable. If the offeror just wants to still sell you the book because maybe they hadn't found anybody else to buy it, they may, but they're not legally obligated to. Similarly, you can terminate an offer due to the death or disability of either party. So what does this mean? If, in the really unfortunate situation, that the offeror makes you an offer to sell you a textbook for $50, and before you can accept, that person passes away or becomes disabled, you can no longer accept their offer. You can't write an email to the family and say, my condolences to the family. Sorry to hear about John Smith, but by the way, he promised me that business law textbook and I'd like to have it. That sounds terrible, right? You couldn't do that. Why? because you had not accepted John Smith's offer to sell you the textbook before he passed away. Now, if you had, you could write that terrible letter. If you had accepted the offer for the textbook for $50 before John passed away, then John passed, you could be that person who contacts the family and says, I'm sorry for your loss, but can you turn over the textbook, right? Why? Because after you accept, you got a binding agreement. Another way that the offer could be terminated prior to the offeree's acceptance is due to subsequent illegality. What does that mean? Subsequent illegality. Well, subsequent means after. Illegality means illegal. So if we learn that after the offer was made, that the terms of the offer are in some way illegal, then that offer automatically is terminated and the offeree cannot accept it. Now, let's go back to the two most common ways to terminate an offer. After revocation, which is very common because the offeror can just change their mind as the master of the offer, we've got two other very important ways that an offer could be terminated. By either rejection or counteroffer by the offeree. So I'd like you to, if you're categorizing this in your mind, these first four ways to terminate the offer are made by the offeror. The offeror revokes the offer. The offeror set a time limit for the offer, and so if you don't respond within that time, it's lapsed. Or an unfortunate death or disability of either party could terminate the offer. Or the offer has terms that we later discover are illegal. The offer would terminate. But counteroffer and rejection are ways to terminate the offer that are initiated by the offeree. So let's look at them. A counteroffer by an offeree. If you, the offeree, make a counteroffer to the terms that you were offered, your counteroffer automatically terminates the original offer. So let's give this example. So the offer to you was to sell you the business law textbook for $50 cash. Let's say it was $50 cash. You do your research, you realize, oh my gosh, this is a fantastic deal. I have gotten to buy this textbook for $50. But you reply, I'll buy the textbook for $50, but I want to pay by credit. Can I put it on my credit card? Or, I'll Venmo or something like that. When you change any term of an offer, you have made a counteroffer. Even though you are offering to pay the same amount of money, when you change any term of the offer, the law considers that a counteroffer. And your counteroffer does two things. First of all, it is a termination and a rejection. So maybe it does three things. It's a termination and a rejection of the original offer, and it proposes a new offer. So your counteroffer terminates the original offer and is a proposal for a new offer. I'll pay you $50, but it's going to be electronic. I'm either going to put it on my credit card or I'm going to use some sort of cash app. Now, we might all be thinking, well, why would anybody have a problem with that? This law doesn't hit at what people individually prefer. Once you mention to the offeror that you would, cash app them the $50, they might personally think, you know what, that's not a bad idea. I'm okay with that. What this law is telling you, and so they might still accept it, but what the law is telling you is that they don't have to, because under the rules of contract, when you, under the common law, because this is a common law concept, when you, the offeree, change any iota of the offer, you have made a counteroffer, and the offeror does not have to accept it, and you have made a rejection, termination of the original offer. And what you've essentially made is a new offer. I will buy your textbook for $50 via Cash App. And so then the original offeror can decide whether or not to accept your counteroffer. You know what? That's a great idea. I'll take it. So, to some extent, you might think, well, these rules sound like technicalities. And they kind of do. These rules really only come up when there's a dispute. Because in real life, people go back and forth and counteroffer all the time. So let's take a more realistic price. What if your classmate had offered you the business law textbook for $150, right? That would probably be a more realistic offer because I think this book is $188 when you rent it. So let's say their first offer was $150 for the textbook. And you heard that and you researched it and you counter offered, well, I'd like to buy your textbook, but what about, will you take $125? When you make that counter offer, you have terminated and rejected the original offer. And the offeror does not have to accept their offer. And everybody kind of knows that. We know that intuitively. You would probably keep going back and forth until you reached an agreement. If you really wanted to buy their book and they really wanted to sell it to you. And once you finally got to a number that you both could agree upon, then you would have a contract. And as long as you actually paid and your form of payment went through, and they actually provided you a textbook and it was the book you thought you were getting, everybody would be happy and there wouldn't be a problem. And no one would actually go back and try to figure out which offer was accepted. These rules that we're looking at come into play when the contract doesn't work out. When you get a textbook and it turns out it wasn't the version, the edition you thought you were getting, that you were paying for. Or, you get the book and you realize pages are missing and you want to get your money back. And so then the offeror says, well, actually, we didn't have a contract. I don't have to give you your money back because when you changed the form of payment, that canceled my offer. And so we don't have a valid contract that you can enforce in a court of law. That's when these rules would come into place. And I want you to think about that as a principle as you are going through the law. The rules are the framework, right, that govern conduct. We talked about what a law is. And there are lots of individual rules that govern the transactions. Parties don't have to actually think about them when things are going well. When each party does what they've agreed upon, these rules are really in the background and they don't come up. It's once there's a dispute that then you would look to one of these sources and try to figure out, how is it supposed to happen? Am I legally obligated to give you the book? Am I legally obligated to pay? And you would use one of these rules as a way to get out of the contract so that you didn't have to pay. So the counteroffer and rejection that I've just talked about are ways that the offeree terminates the offer by changing the terms of the offer, by making a different offer, or if the offeree just flat out rejects the offer. When someone offers to sell you the textbook for $150 and you just say no, that's a flat rejection that does not keep the negotiation moving forward. So that can also happen. But I want you to understand that your counteroffer also essentially acts like a rejection, because it is assumed that if you're changing the terms, you are rejecting the original offer. You're also terminating that offer, and you are making a new offer. That's what the counteroffer does, all of those things. The offeree must now accept the offer. How do they accept the offer? They must unconditionally accept all of the terms. That is referred to as the mirror image rule. It's referred to as the mirror image rule because the acceptance must reflect, like a mirror, exactly what was offered. As we just discussed, If the offeree changes anything about that offer, it terminates the offer. It's a rejection of the offer. Their change constitutes a counteroffer, and their counteroffer is a new offer. So in order to avoid any of that, the offeree must make sure that their acceptance is a mirror image of what they were offered. Now, we've also talked about who may accept the offer. Only the intended offeree, right? You can't accept an offer if it was not made to you. You can't overhear somebody else's great offer and accept it. I'm going to put a caveat here. Let's say you do overhear somebody else's great offer to a friend. What if a student was offering a textbook for a different class, right? Statistics, and you overheard the offer, and the person, the intended offeree, let's call them offeree number one, wasn't interested. And so then you walk up and say, hey, but I need a statistics textbook. I'll buy it from you. Now, under the law, because you were not the intended offeree of the initial offer, you are not accepting the offer that was made to offeree number one. You are making your own offer based upon what you heard, and then that person with the textbook is accepting your offer. That is how the law would view that. You would not be said to be accepting the original offer because you weren't the intended offeree. Instead, you would be making your own offer, which then the other person accepted. Now, in real life, we don't think that way. If I am making an offer trying to sell my textbook and somebody overhears and they jump in and say, hey, I got $50 right now, I'll take it. We don't stop and say, I wasn't making you that offer. You need to wait. Let me finalize this situation and then I'll make you your own formal offer. We typically don't act that way unless we're not really trying to sell things. These rules, again, are for the situation when we have a dispute and we need to sort out what actually happened. Because in real life, most of us would be really excited and more than happy to sell that book to the person who happened to overhear our offer, so long as they have money. And we would not care that we weren't actually making that person the offer. But if something goes wrong and that person who overheard, who was not your intended offeree, and they sue you because they don't like the quality of the book that you provided, you could go into court and you could argue they were not your intended offeree, and therefore they can enforce the contract against you. So that's what these rules do. They really come into play when we have disputes. Now, with an acceptance, the crucial piece of it is the manner of acceptance, which is the mirror image rule that I referred to, making sure that you are accepting the exact precise terms. And then the other portion of this is the timing of the acceptance. When is your acceptance effective? So let's look at that more closely. When looking at the timing of the acceptance, we have two scenarios. The first scenario is when the parties are negotiating in person. When the parties are negotiating in person, you don't have that many issues regarding timing, because the offeror is going to make the offer, I'll sell you the textbook for $50, and the offeree is right there, and the offeree can either accept the terms of the offer, I'll take it, make a counter offer, what about $35? Or they, which would be our counter offer, they could reject it. No, I've already bought my book. All of the transactions are taking place in real time, and they are effective as soon as the other party receives it. That's our easy scenario. Timing becomes more of an issue when the parties are not together. If the offer is being communicated via mail, email, or text, the offer is not going to be effective, i.e. known to the offeree, until the offeree actually receives the offer. So if you send someone an email offering to sell them your textbook, they don't know about the offer until they actually receive the email, open it, and read it. At that time, the offer has been communicated to the offeree. The offer is effective when it is actually received. Similarly, if while the offeree is pondering the offer, if the offeror sends a second email letting them know, I've already sold the book, i.e. that's a revocation. And notice there, the offeror is not writing, I'm revoking my offer. Most people aren't going to say it like that. And remember, revocation doesn't take certain words. But if I send you an email saying, guess what, I already sold the book, given that my offer was to sell you the book, when my second email comes saying, I have already sold the book, that lets the offeree know that the offer has been revoked. And as long as the offeree receives that email revoking the original offer before the offeree has accepted, then that revocation is effective. So when the transactions are not in the same place as it relates to offers, revocations, rejections, and counteroffers, those communications are not effective until they are actually received by the party. The carve-out, the exception, is when an offeree is sending an acceptance. We have something called the mailbox rule to govern the timing of an acceptance. When the parties are not in the same place and the offeree is sending an acceptance that by the mirror image rule, they are accepting the exact terms of the offer and they're sending it back to the offeror. The mailbox rule provides that as soon as that acceptance is dispatched, i.e. sent, it is effective. So acceptance is effective upon dispatch. That's a holdover from when we used to send most things via actual hard mail. But the mailbox rule also applies with electronic mail. So, offeror emails you, I'll sell you the textbook for $50. You, the offeree, receive the email. That offer is effective because you have received it. You, the offeree, decide, this is a good deal, I'm going to accept. So you send an email saying, I'll buy it. I'll buy it is an unconditional acceptance of the terms. You didn't say I'll buy it for $50, but you didn't change anything either. So that's going to qualify as an acceptance. Well, because it is an acceptance and because we're using the mailbox rule, as soon as you hit send on your email, it has been dispatched and it is effective. That means there is a binding agreement for the offeror to sell you their textbook for $50. A binding agreement. And because there's a binding agreement, it's got legal consequences. Even though the offeror does not know that you, the offeree, have sent your acceptance, there is a binding contract. That is huge. I want you to think about it. Why? Why is that a big deal? Well, what the mailbox rule does is it creates a contract as soon as the offeree sends their acceptance. Put it in the mail, hit send, be it text or email, and the offeror doesn't know. And remember, the offeror, as the master of the offer, could be out selling that book to other people because they hadn't heard from you yet. They haven't actually received your acceptance. The offeror could legitimately think, well, I could go sell this book to somebody else who I just ran into who's got their money right now. So that's where the problem is, because if they do that, if the offeror sells the textbook to the third party and you, the offeree, could prove that you sent your acceptance before that other contract was entered, then you would have a binding contract for the textbook for $50. And if you were willing, and I know who would be, to go to court, small claims court is where you'd have to go, and sue over a $50 textbook, you could, and you could win. Why? Because under the common law, as it relates to contracts, a binding agreement is formed as soon as the acceptance is dispatched, even though the offeror does not know. Acceptances are the only communication that is effective upon dispatch. Every other type, offer, counteroffer, rejection, revocation, those have to actually be received. But the acceptance is effective upon dispatch per the mailbox rule. You might say this rule makes no sense. I would agree with you. So what do we do about it? One of the reasons that business people take law classes, why you're in this class, is so that you can learn about potential problems so that you know to plan ahead and avoid them. The main reason we learn this archaic mailbox rule is so that we can contract around it. Remember, offeror is the master of the offer. If you as the offeror know about the mailbox rule, then you can avoid it because you can make it a stipulation of your offer that the acceptance is not effective until I actually get it. You could also put the time frame, right? You could say this offer is only good until 5 o'clock today. You must respond by email, and your email is effective upon my receipt. If you put those kind of things in the offer, you are getting rid of the mailbox rule. And that's why we learn the law. So we know what we want to keep in our contracts and what we don't. The mailbox rule is what operates in effect unless the parties decide something else. And in this case, it would be the offeror who would want to get rid of the mailbox rule. So you should make it a stipulation in your offer that the acceptance must come in a certain manner and you must actually receive it before it can become effective.